People, Deluded, I'm back again. Special guest settings. You lot have been on to me to get a video done with him, and we're finally here. Harry, how you doing, my friend? It's been a minute.
I'm good, mate. How you doing? Long time no speak. How's it all going?
Long time no speak, as you said, man. I'm good, man. Obviously, you're an Arsenal fan. You know the highs and lows this season. I must admit, now that the season's done, I do miss us, man. I guess that's the disease we have as football fans. What about yourself, man? Now you got time to reflect.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I need a bit of time to just kind of unwind from what's been a long and difficult emotionally season. But I think we're all going to get caught up in the transfer talk. It's not going to stop. It's going to be going all summer long. I think if you need a break from it, you need to take that break yourself, because I'm telling you, with all the rumors and reports going around, you're not going to get that opportunity, really, I don't think, to switch off unless you kind of force it upon yourself.
As you said, they're facts, Harry, man. And I understand, fans are frustrated about the season, the transfer stuff with Arsenal, and apparently we take forever to sign players. And naturally, we only care about Arsenal Football Club. But when you see what's going on with others, it does add fuel to the fire. As I said, yeah, to kick this off, I was asked to do this video with you. That's why I'm even more happy that you're here. Yeah, I got a couple of questions my fans asked me to ask you. It's actually nice to ask someone else. I'm gonna start with the first one. Yeah, do you think Arteta needs to evolve tactically next season or double down on his blueprint?
I think you always need to be evolving. I think that's really, really important in modern day football. You've got some really intelligent coaches in the Premier League now from all over the world with different
Facts.
ideas, different philosophies, and different strengths and weaknesses. And I think if you don't constantly adapt, you'll end up falling behind. I think Mikel has adapted quite a bit, actually, since he took over as Arsenal boss. You think about the team that won the FA Cup. I know it wasn't his team, but you think about the tweaks and adjustments we've made, the role of the fullbacks, the way that we push fullbacks into midfield, the way that we utilize our wide players, the way that we play with a false nine at times, which isn't something we did when Aubameyang was in the team, for example. I think he's adapted and adjusted a lot over the years, and so I've got quite a bit of faith, actually, that he can continue to do that. In terms of his blueprint, because I know a lot of people get frustrated by his blueprint and sort of often point back to that. I don't think that Mikel Arteta's blueprint is to be pragmatic over bold or over bravery. I don't think that's what the blueprint looks like. I think it's something that we've by default kind of gone into because of some of the big absences that we had last season. And I think the lack of having that personnel available to us when we really needed them meant that we were naturally less creative, less able to break low blocks down. And I think, looking at, for example, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, but looking at PSG against us and in the rest of the Champions League, you look at that forward line and you go, they have got literally 3 match winners in that forward line. And we don't necessarily have that. We've probably got one that you can
Exactly,
rely
yeah.
upon regularly in Saka. Exactly. Havertz can do it on his day. Martinelli can do it on his day. Trossard can do it on his day. But I think it's more a personnel issue than it is a Mikel Arteta and his plan kind of problem.
I think you're bang on the money, man. I think in relation to this season, I think it's been more adapting from Arteta versus evolving. I know people talk about the 5-year period and you kind of alluded to it with the FA Cup, but for me, I look at the last 3 years. So like 2022, 23 to now, that's kind of where we've come into these conversations about Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues and things. And I think the first year we was blisteringly good going forward. I think a lot of us fans look at it with rose tints and forget a lot of the games were on knife edge. So I think Arteta, double down a bit defensively. That takes us into the following season where we were great defensively. This year, I feel it's more adapting. Like you can't get away from talking about Arsenal, bro, without speaking about the injuries. And like you said, the personnel, whether we did or didn't do what needed to be done in the summer, we're kind of at where we're at. I got a question of my own, yeah, because you touched on the false nine stuff, and I know we're gonna get onto Gyökeres and Sesko and things, but like, do you think it's a bit too niche with the striker role that Mikel Arteta wants? Obviously, we need a striker that scores goals, but I think fans need to really comprehend that it's all the other facets that Arteta wants. We're not going to sign a striker unless they're able to do that. So, what do you think of the role potentially for Sesko and Gyökeres or any striker, really?
Yeah, I think the role is more all-encompassing than
Exactly.
people want to accept, and I don't really understand why. Like, you can sit there and you can talk about these kind of like fox in the box type strikers that get one chance and bang. And yes, you'd love to have one of those players with that kind of clinical edge in your team. But Mikel Arteta's philosophy and idea is based around the sharing of goal scoring. He's not a manager that wants to funnel everything through one individual. That's not how he operates. That's not what he believes is the most effective way. I think he probably feels that if you go down that route and someone shuts down one of your key players or your key player, the guy that you want to run everything through, that can be really problematic. So if you go back to the first year we competed for the league, you had Saka on 15 goals, Odegaard on 15 goals. You had Martinelli on 15 league goals. And that was only possible because Gabriel Jesus was the type of centre forward that he is.
Sacrificial
Yes,
lamb.
exactly. He contributed goals, yes. Not as many as we'd have liked, but he still made a fair contribution. He got into double figures that season. And I think, we've got to realize and wake up to the fact that that's what Mikel wants. Now, you might not agree with it. I might not agree with it, but
That's what he wants.
That's what he wants. That's what he's building towards. And it's like when people slag off Kai Havertz, they only look at the output in terms of his goals. They don't look at the fact that he drops deep and he brings other people into the game.
They don't care about it, bro.
They don't care. They don't care that he runs channels and he stretches teams. They don't care that he's a threat from set pieces, both offensively and defensively. They don't care that he can drop into midfield and support when the team's struggling. They don't look at any of that. And it's really basic analysis when it comes to our centre forwards. And then, we're going to talk about Sesko and Gyökeres, as you mentioned a little bit later on. But I've got my concerns about both of those two guys. Like, I don't look at any of them and go, you are definitely going to improve our starting 11 to the point where we're now definitely going to go on and win the league. So it begs the question then, doesn't it? Like, go back to Kai Havertz and look at him and think, okay, if you're banging on about wanting an upgrade on him, you've got to find a player that literally is an upgrade in multiple areas of the game, not just in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net. Because if you gain that but lose the all-round game, you also take away from the players around him, and the unit is then not stronger for it.
I think you're bang on, and I think you mentioned PSG, and I know Luis Enrique isn't, in my opinion, fond of Ramos, but I look at how he's reworked Dembele and how he's playing as a false nine, and that's his kind of man. And you have that plan B of Ramos on the bench if things do go level to just simply utilize. Maybe that's something for us to consider. I want to ask you another question, because you mentioned Gabriel Jesus, and we would have liked him to have scored more goals for all his quality. That's something that's probably plagued his career since he's moved to Europe, right? And we know we need a striker that's going to score goals. Equally, as you said, whether people like it or lump it or care, you have to be able to do all the other kind of things. And naturally, we're Arsenal. We've been used to strikers. We'll be here all day speaking about them. But do you think we're too focused and fixated on a striker? Because you mentioned how, Arteta wants to share the goals around. Is it as important, equally more important, to get an upgrade on that left-hand side, potentially, with all the names we're linked with?
I look at it from a more kind of zoomed out approach, right? So I look at it like this. We need more outputs in the final third of the pitch. Now, however you want to make that up as the manager, I don't mind. If you want to go and spend 100 million on a left winger and 20 million on a centre forward, but you get the outputs that we're after, I don't mind.
Happy.
And if you want to flip it the other way around and spend 100 million on a striker and spend 20 million on a left winger, as long as we get the outputs that we need, again, I'm okay with that. So I think we obsess about profiles of players. I think we look at players and we go, we need a A9 who plays in this way, whose strengths are this, whose weaknesses are that. And that comes from a place of greater knowledge than maybe we had in years gone by of, what's out there in terms of in the other leagues, what's available to us in terms of statistics and underlying metrics. We look at all of that stuff and we almost in our heads build up a profile that we think is the answer and that nothing else around that sort of type of profile is any good to us.
Yep.
So I worry that we're really obsessed with the number 9 to the point where that might not be the issue. Go back to last season, right, when we had problems. Okay, we were missing key players, but I still didn't look at us in some of those games and think if we had that killer number 9, we win this game. Because at times I didn't ever feel that we were bringing the centre forward into the position or that we were working the ball into that part of the penalty area whereby a centre forward of that profile we're talking about could really come alive. So for that reason, I think it's just really important that we bring a bit more flair, a bit more match-winning capability. One of my criticisms of Arteta over the last few years, and I'm a big Arteta fan, I'm fully on board, but one of the things I've always kind of had in the back of my mind is, do we have enough flair in our team? Have we coached the flair out of this team? Is that the way that we want to go? Do we prefer functionality over flair? And you watch PSG and you see flair galore. And that's amazing. And that's what I, as a football man, want to see. But in the Arsenal team, you don't have that right now. And the players that we're being linked with don't exactly bring that either. So I'm starting to lean towards the idea of it being an Arteta thing in terms of functionality, physicality over flair for him. In which case, does that still solve the problem that we have? I don't know.
And that's a good point, because it's like, how far does it go? Is that something that you reckon Mikel Arteta has got to rest in terms of his own coaching philosophies, whether it's at Arsenal or elsewhere? Because I'm a bit like you. It's like, I'm a big fan of Arteta, but I can criticize certain things. I think people want to have their cake and eat it. You know, I want my manager to be a control freak. I want him to do all of those things he's done, because as much as people call his tactics negative and defensive, we wouldn't be to this point. I'm not happy to be here. You know, I'm not screaming and shouting about second, but we're at this point. We're a difficult team to play against. We've got a great top six record. We got to the semi-finals. But then I look at Luis Enrique. Now, of course, I'm not comparing the managers, but they're very similar in that they micromanage. But I just feel Luis Enrique, maybe it's an experience thing, because I do feel that's been a theme of Arteta this year. He's found that freedom within a framework, as you've put. You know, he's reinvented Dembele in that false nine. He's got Carrot Skeeler and all them guys shining and they're defending. Is that something Arteta maybe has to let go then? Because I don't know if it's as simple as we get that left winger, that striker, and bang, we're immediately better forever. Because there's been times where we've had all our players out there, and I'm not saying everyone's the best, but I've still questioned how we're creating chances. And then we've also had that double-edged sword where we've created like 2 chances and we've not necessarily converted it. So I understand why fans say, you know what, we might just need better players. But where do you stand on that?
I think we need better players in a lot of areas, actually. Yeah, I think, you know, yes, okay, as a coach, I think he's got some shortcomings, and I think these are things that he's going to learn along the way. And he's going to learn from season to season, right? You reflect on a campaign, you look back at maybe what you could have done better, and you realize that you made a mistake, perhaps that you didn't feel was a mistake at the time, or that you couldn't see at the time. That happens to all of us in every line of work, right? But I think for me, we're so obsessed with the forward line. Actually, the midfield was a big problem last season. Creativity. You know, Partey can only do so much from the 6 role in terms of pulling the strings. Declan Rice is a fantastic ball carrier, and he contributed a lot, particularly in the second half of the season, in that final third, getting forward, using his power, his strength, scoring goals, big goals. All of that's great. But is he the premium type player when you're trying to unlock a low block? I don't think he is.
In that 8 role,
I don't think he is. And then you've got Martin Odegaard, who can be that. We know he can because we've seen it before, but just completely fell off a cliff in terms of his form. So I actually think, in terms of creativity, the Zubimendi signing could be massive, because if Martin Odegaard's not on it and he's not making it work, then you need someone else in that midfield that can step 5-10 yards further up the pitch and start to dictate the tempo.
Start conducting.
Exactly. And start to unpick locks. We don't have that right now. You know, if I say Rice isn't that guy, and he's a great player, but he isn't that, then what are the alternatives? We had Jorginho, who would have come in as the 6, but didn't have the legs to get up into more advanced positions and then get back into the 6. We always felt the need to protect him when he was playing, and that hindered us in other ways, I felt.
Facts.
Or, you know, Mikel Merino, he's not that either. You know, he's that big, powerful, functional midfield player. We just don't have enough of that flair and enough of that quality. I didn't think Mikel was ever really confident enough in one area, maybe physically, to stick him in there when we could have done with it.
Well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that midfield is something that we need to work on as well. And you got to find that balance. You look at Luis Enrique's midfield, and they're the benchmark right now. They're the European champions, and they've blown everybody away. You know, you looked at that midfield, and everybody said going into all the games that they played against English opposition, that midfield's going to get overpowered, overrun. Nope. Didn't happen once. And I was in Vitinha's press conference before the Arsenal game, before the home leg, and someone asked him, do you worry about the power and the physicality of Declan Rice? And he literally said, you've said this to me before every game that we've played in the Champions League this season, and it doesn't happen. You said it to us against Liverpool, and it doesn't happen. We can hold our own. And not only have they got that ability to buzz around the pitch and close spaces down and be aggressive, but they're all of an incredibly high technical level. We've got the physical element, but we don't necessarily have the technical level. So maybe and hopefully Zubimendi brings that.
I mean, it's a bit weird you saying that. Not weird, because I think you're speaking facts, and I'm not necessarily criticizing Mikel Arteta. I just feel collectively as a club, we've got to this point now of getting over the line, and everything you've touched on, I actually think we need to kind of do. But I just found it's a bit weird that never during this Emirates era that I would have thought that, we'd be described as a physical team, not necessarily a technical one. I know we've got technical quality, but then it makes me ask you, like, obviously, I've indirectly asked you about a striker, I've asked you about a left winger, you're spot on about Zubimendi. Do you feel, and obviously Zubimendi could, Mikel Arteta, I think against Bournemouth, it didn't work, but he played like what I would say a flat midfield three rather than Odegaard being there. Do you feel like we need to prioritize direct competition or someone that can deputize for Odegaard? Because there has been times where I thought it might be a case of just take him out the firing line. How many times do we see that a player's trying to play into form, it doesn't happen, you come out the side for someone else, they have a good game, you come back in, Bob's your uncle? Like, do you think that's a priority for us, that 8.5, that 10, or should it be?
I think it's something that we can solve internally if we've got everybody else fit. And that's the key, right? Like I
Yeah,
felt that during that period where Odegaard was really struggling, I would have quite liked to have seen, I know people will laugh at this, but I'd have quite liked to have seen Kai Havertz come into that position. He can do the physical stuff. He can defend.
and
He
then
can
do the
ghost.
tactical stuff.
Exactly. He can ghost into the penalty area. One of the things we talked about a lot when we signed him was him arriving at the far post. Everyone was talking about the left-hand side, but why couldn't he do that from the right-hand side, coming in on his left foot? Like it's
True.
doable. And I look at him and I think if he was available, we might have had a situation where we could have left Mikel Merino up front, which was working, and we could have had Kai Havertz playing and getting really close to him and gone a little bit more direct with those two big men in there. It doesn't always have to be an 8/10, the role that right-sided player plays. Sometimes they can go and play as a second striker. And if you've got the right midfield balance behind them, like nobody would have had an issue with Partey and Rice sitting as a 2. Like that would have been pretty strong, wouldn't it? And that can happen going forward with Rice and Zubimendi or Partey and Zubimendi, depending on if Partey stays. We've got options internally. One of the things that Mikel does deserve credit for is that he's built a side that's very versatile. There's a lot of players in that team that can
play many roles.
Exactly, that can help you in multiple positions. And I think a lot of the problems that we suffered, we had solutions internally. It's just that those solutions weren't available to us either. So I don't want to overreact and be like the squad's too small and the squad's too thin. No, actually, we had an unprecedented amount of injuries. And if you take that out of the equation, then actually we're in much better shape as a squad than I think people give us credit for.
I don't think you're wrong. I just feel like Mikel Arteta said, it's just about adding quality and a few more numbers. He keeps, obviously you're in the press conferences and I know managers have to be a bit diplomatic. Obviously what they're going to say in public and what they would say to their, friends and family and their close circle is very different. But I don't think Arteta's ever lied. I don't necessarily think he's ever been specific. I feel as the season's kind of been winding down, he's been very specific about Berta, about what the club needs to do. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but it's almost like he's signaling his intention and kind of putting at the feet of the powers that be above you. He's quite bullish and he's talking about goosebumps and things like that. So I know they're going to be on the case with that in that regard. It's just like you said, we've got to find that balance of, having our way of playing, having our identity and having an ability to pivot. You mentioned Paris Saint-Germain. I have to ask you, obviously when we went out against PSG, Arteta said we're the best team in the Champions League. Where are you with that? Because I love Arteta, but I get it, but I can't say I agree, Arteta, man. I can't.
Yeah, I didn't agree either. And I went quite big on it the next day because like I just felt like it was Mikel Arteta being a bit of a sore loser. Now,
sour grapes.
Yeah, to get to that level, you have to be a pretty bad loser, right? You have to have
True.
that drive and that fuel. And so I don't necessarily have a massive problem with it. But in terms of those comments, in isolation, they were wrong. And I felt that he needed to come out and respect PSG for what they'd done to us over the 2 legs. We had a lot of the ball at times, but it was because they wanted us. They were fine with us having the ball. They were in front. There was no need for them to go chasing the game. Did we create some chances? Yes, we did. Did we run them closer than most? Yes. But to say that we were better than them was to fundamentally overlook one of the most important thing in football, which is conversion. If you can't convert, then there's no point in having all of the ball and there's no point in having all the XG numbers and all the rest of it.
Facts.
So it was as if he kind of looked at the stat sheet maybe after the game that was given to him. He highlighted the things that were favorable to us, but just completely ignored all the rest of it. And that for me saw him come across a little bit delusional. We know him because he's our manager and we want him to succeed and we love him. And so we looked at it and went, okay, like he's just really upset. You could see it on his
emotional
face.
right now.
He's emotional, exactly. But others would have taken that in a really bad way. And I think as a manager, you don't just manage your own fans. You don't just manage, everybody else, like sort of within your club and within your sphere. You have to manage the wider media as well, because the narratives around you often come from them. You know,
Even when you don't speak.
even exactly what's Gary Neville saying about you? Now, you might sit there and go, I don't give a shit what Gary Neville says about me, but ultimately that is going to spread like
It's going to
wildfire.
grab traction.
Exactly. And it creates a narrative around you. So I think you've got to be really careful. It's the hardest thing in the world to keep a lid on your emotions when you're that invested in something. But he failed to do it on that night. He did.
And ironically, Harry, I think that's above all, before we talk about tactics and all of that kind of stuff with Arteta, the thing I like is the passion, because you don't get to this point, you don't do what you're doing without the passion. And obviously, I think that way the passion kind of went the other way, and he got a bit emotional. He'll learn from that. And I think you made a great point in that. I don't know what it is with Arsenal. I know our social media space is probably the biggest of all football clubs, but everything is highlighted, whether we speak or not. And nobody rates us, but we're spoken about every day, which I find quite baffling. And for Mikel Arteta, he just probably, I guess, got to be a bit careful, because I've seen him talk about a football, his words be taken completely out of context against Newcastle, and then just people getting onto him, man. Keeping up the theme with the questions people ask me to ask you, do you think Mikel Arteta has a cult following? Because I'm like you, I'm a big fan of his. I back him. Obviously, I don't back him religiously to the point of, God forbid, if we get success, great. But if we get to a point where we need to go somewhere else, then yeah, I'm on that. I do feel there's those committed to just hating on the guy, just completely just attacking him. I do feel there's some that rate him and rate what he's doing, but always find excuses. And then I feel, actually, like yourself, because you've just criticized Mikel Arteta, which isn't wrong. No one's above critique. We fall into the middle ground in the sense that we can comprehend the good, the bad, the ugly. You get your flowers for that, you get your flowers for this, and then we kind of lean the other way. But like, do you feel there's like a cult kind of following with Arteta?
I had this discussion on my pod a few
I think
weeks
that's why they
ago
asked me to ask you
with Sophie, and I don't think there is a cult. I think that's something that the naysayers throw around in terms of a term. I don't believe that for a second. What I do think, though, is that there's a lot of people that have watched him pick this club off the ground and have a lot of faith in him as a result of that, and they're enjoying the ride, even if we're not getting the results that we want right now. And for that reason, they're willing to back him. And naturally, when you care for something, or you feel like someone is doing good, you're going to get defensive of them. I think, like, you're right. We criticize Arteta quite a bit. I do, for sure. I know I do. But because I don't sit there and call him effing this and effing that, or call for his head after every negative result, people say I don't criticize him. No, criticism can be done in a constructive way, and it can be done respectfully.
Exactly.
He's the manager of the football club that I adore. And in my opinion, overall, he's doing a good job. Why would I sit there and slag him off for no reason?
Exactly, where it's unwarranted.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely unjustified in a lot of cases. Like, for example, the whole January thing. We didn't get a striker. It's Arteta's fault. The guy literally sat in multiple performances and told you he wanted one. We all know, those of us that are covering Arsenal regularly, we all know, and I have this on very, very good authority, and I'm not one of those guys that claims to be in the know, so I don't just pluck crap out of the air. He wanted to sign Ollie Watkins in January, and
he was dying for it.
And Arsenal Football Club decided that price was not a price point they were willing to go to. That was a disagreement between Arteta and the football club. Why should he be thrown under the bus for that? He literally came out and said, we're short. And a few months later, when he was asked about it, he said, did I not make myself clear that I wanted a striker?
Another one where he got snappy.
Exactly. He gets snappy because he gets people coming.
And it's warranted sometimes.
Yeah, exactly, man. Like, to me, it's wild that, listen, criticize him for his tactics, criticize him for his selections, criticize him for in-game management, criticize him for things that are within his remit. But it seems that there's not that intelligence out there to be able to decide between what falls in his remit and what doesn't. Like, it's just a basic understanding of how a football club is run. He might have a big hand in identifying players. He might have a big hand in who we sign and who we don't in most instances, but he doesn't have free reign and the ability to sign checks for whoever he feels like signing at whatever given time. And that, with Andrea Berta coming in, is going to be even more of the case, because now we've got a sporting director who's powerful, who's got that reputation behind him. Whereas with Edu, like in a proverbial way, they were kind of like walking down the road, holding hands, finding a way to getting Arsenal back on track.
They're
Because
both
both of
learning
them,
their respective crafts.
exactly. So I actually think he's got less control today than he's ever had. Yet we still want to throw all the shade at him when we don't get signings that, as fans, we think we need.
It depends. You know what it is with it, Harry? It depends what sort of agenda you want to fit, really and truly. I think many fans, mainly those that don't get the limelight shined on them, could see that the club tell us about collaboration. Okay, maybe Arteta has to be held accountable for this. Maybe this is out of his remit. But fundamentally, we're all in this together. Like, we share the W's and we share the L's. And again, even with Edu, like, I even feel I was a lot more harsher on Edu, to the point where I had to sit there and be like, hold on, like, you're actually not in the dressing room or whatever. As much as I personally feel Edu failed to get the players we needed, or even when he's identified Kai Havertz, getting him for the money and on the contracts he's on. What if Edu was saying, no, Arteta, we need X, Y, Z, and Arteta went the other way? My point being, everybody has to be held accountable. So what do you make of the power dynamics for Berta then? Because I did feel when we got Arteta and Edu, I wasn't a fan of necessarily like a rookie manager and a quote unquote rookie sporting director. I kind of wanted this, where you've got Arteta, who's obviously, with years gone on, a bit more experienced now, and you've got an experienced head. What do you make of that come this summer? And like, do you feel this would be the Berta kind of summer? Because I'm putting my hopes in Berta. Like, I keep saying in Berta, we trust on my platform. Like, I really got a lot of hope.
Yeah, I mean, the power dynamic's interesting because we don't really know how it's going to look, and I think we got to be really careful of some of the stories that we're reading, because, for example, when he first came in, it was Arsenal don't want Sesko anymore, they want Gyökeres. And why do they want Gyökeres? Well, because Andrea Berta wants Gyökeres. And now it's like, well, no, actually, Arsenal are exploring the possibility of both
swings and roundabouts,
and then they're going to figure out what they want to do. And I know a lot of people will judge the power dynamic based on which striker we get. And they'll say, well, if we get Sesko, then that's Arteta being the leader and being powerful, because that's the one that he's wanted for a while. We know that we went for him last summer. We know that we inquired again in January. Andrea Berta coming in has kind of refreshed the Gyökeres chat, if you like. And I think if we end up with him, people will probably turn around and tell you the opposite, which is that Berta's calling the shots. The truth is, they need to work in collaboration.
Exactly.
It isn't a power struggle. Like, if the sporting director works in collaboration with the manager and the manager succeeds, the sporting director looks great, and vice versa. If the manager succeeds, the sporting director is winning, and vice versa, right? That's how it works. So I don't understand why people want or expect Berta to come in and have just picked up every plan that Arsenal maybe had and ripped it up and thrown it out the window and gone, nope, we're doing it my way. No, we got here. Yeah, exactly. And we got here because Mikel Arteta, a lot of the time, was steering the ship. You don't just take the captaincy of the ship away from him and give it to someone else. Maybe he needs support in order to take that next step.
100% he does.
I think that's fair. But it's got to be a collaborative relationship for sure.
Like, I want to pick my words wisely, but it's like Arteta has been a talismanic figure for us. Like, he's almost like the Wenger. I need Berta to be the David Dean, because I do think we need that. We need our kind of golden child of the Emirates era. Like I said, both have a lot to live up to with them legendary names. I think you said it there. I think Arteta needs help. I think we need an ability to pivot, and that's something I felt we haven't said that we're seen. If I'm honest with you, it's like we're going after one guy. For whatever reason, if that doesn't happen, we're kind of left in the lurch. And you have probably a summer like last summer where you get Raheem Sterling and Neto, with the greatest of respect. That's actually why I like the whole Sesko and Gyökeres. We're trying to tie up both deals and move in other directions, because if for whatever reason, if one says no, then it is what it is. And Berta's realistically just walked in. The club have been probably scouting Sesko for years. They probably know all his qualities, how he helps us in the short and long term. They've probably butted heads, pros of this one, cons of the other. And at the end of the day, fans just want a striker, because I think both are a risk. But I just feel this is a summer where we just need to address the areas we need to address. And I want to be wary of putting, as much as I sound like a hypocrite, of putting too much trust in Berta. Well, gassing up Berta too much, because I think he's got a lot to do in a matter of months. Like, I don't think the man's going to sleep a blink. But it's nice, man. It's positive. I like it. And you mentioned like butting heads and things. I don't think that's a bad thing. People genuinely have to understand. Arteta must butt heads with his coaches. The players must want to argue with each other all the time. We saw with Berta and Simeone because they might have different viewpoints, but it's for the same collective kind of goal. So we just need to get it done. How do you feel about the spending? Like, obviously, you're not a financial expert, nor are you with working with Berta, but you see a lot of fees. You see 200 million, 300 million war chest. Like, do you feel it's accurate, those kind of things or statements that come out?
I don't know. I don't think there's a world
Same.
in which Arsenal want everybody to know what they can and can't spend.
It'd be stupid.
Yeah, it'd be silly. You'd be giving the sort of opposition or the clubs that you're trying to buy from, you'd be giving them ammunition in a negotiation. It's like going into a gunfight with a baseball bat. Do you know what I mean?
With a
Like,
toothpick or something
yeah,
better yet.
yeah, exactly. You'd be on the back foot already. So I don't read into that too much, and I think there are so many moving parts as well when it comes to how much Arsenal can spend. It was that they need to stick within FFP rules, but they also need to meet the UEFA regulations. They need to keep the
A lot
salary
to consider.
bill under control, which is for me probably a bigger problem actually than generating transfer fees, because that's an ongoing rolling cost. You know, any big corporation with a bit of movement can release funds to do a deal. The question is, can you keep up the payments and can you keep up with the ongoing and rolling costs?
Facts.
So that's where I sort of don't like to get into the whole you know, how much can we spend thing. And I think that's dangerous, because what people do is then they draw up these scenarios in their heads. I saw someone yesterday in my live chat going, well, if we've got 200 million to spend and Sesko is going to cost 70 and Gyökeres is going to cost 60, why don't we sign both? And then we've got two strikers for 130 million quid.
Forgetting
And
about
then
the
we've got,
wages.
yeah, and then we've got 70 million that we can spend on a winger, and we've already paid for Zubimendi. So this 200 million must be after Zubimendi. And it's like, now you're drawing up a scenario in your head that is completely unrealistic. And now when we hit under that in terms of what we spend,
You're
you're
going
going
to
to turn
foam at the
around and
mouth.
go, yeah, you're going to go, what a disgrace. We had 200 million pounds to spend and they were penny pinching and they didn't want to do it. And it's like, for God's sake, for God's sake.
But that's football, Harry, man. That's football fans. For me, I mean, naturally, you see what PSG have. There is an element of you need to spend top money, and we don't do it all the time, but we spent big money on Declan Rice. Equally, if spending money was everything, then Man United would be doing a lot better. Even us on an occasion with Nicolas Pepe and so on and so forth. For me, I'm quite fluid. I've seen teams sign players that are not necessarily glamorous at the point of entry into clubs, like Mo Salah. Like, no one was screaming and shouting about him. The man's gone on to be a Premier League legend. Equally, I've seen stars bought for clubs. As long as I see a strategy, and I think we do have that, and you add in Berta, you lot just do your thing really and truly, and just anyone that's a naysayer, just prove them wrong. But one thing I do want is, I don't want to have a summer like last summer. I think we owe it to ourselves to do what we need to do in that regard. If we move this chat on, yeah, I do want to ask you this, not to make you reflect too much on the season, but I did see this tweet and I've been asking everyone their thoughts. If you're just listening, with Arsenal's 2024-25 season now wrapped up, I want to know your player of the season, young player of the season, most improved, unsung hero, disappointment of the season, performance of the season, and goal of the season. Let's start with goal of the season.
Oh, it's got to be the Declan Rice free kick against Real Madrid. For me, I know a lot of people pick the second one. I picked the first one because of the way he whips it around the wall. And he's not got that confidence, has he, from the first one to aid him there. He's just completely plucked it out of nothing. So that's my goal of the season. What's yours?
Do you know what? I would say Declan Rice's got a free kick against Real Madrid, but the second one, because I agree
Okay.
with you. And it was, the first one, it was random. Nobody saw that in the script, but to do it again, like, because you know how people are, oh, it's a fluke and whatnot, but to do it again, like, I can't put it into words. I would say that, or I would actually say, if it was away from that, because I feel all of us naturally gravitate towards that, I might say Gabriel's in the North London derby away, or I might say, because of this ongoing beef we seem to have with Arsenal and City, and Lewis Skelly's the poster boy of it. Obviously, Lewis Skelly at the Emirates, if I'm honest. Do you know what? Probably, let me go with, for this, I'll go with Lewis Skelly's against City, man, because I just feel we're all just saying Real Madrid, and we've probably got some goals we've missed out. I'm sure Saka scored a very good goal against Liverpool at the Emirates. We've watched a lot of football, so I'm not sure, but yeah, man, I'd go with that. What's your performance of the season? I mean, I'm pretty sure I know.
I know a lot of people are going to go with Real Madrid at home. I'm going to go with Real Madrid away because I thought we managed that situation so well. Like I was at the game. I was covering the game for radio, and I remember walking out from the press room into the Bernabeu, and literally my heart just dropped.
It's a
Like
dungeon.
we were 3-0 up, and I was so intimidated by that place. And even at 3-0 up, I never at any point felt comfortable. But then you watched Arsenal grow into the game, had to deal with the setback of missing a penalty, and obviously Real Madrid thought they had a penalty, and just the whole emotional roller coaster of that night. And I thought Arsenal just managed it to perfection. And then to go and win the game as well just made it the perfect trip for those away fans. So I'll go with Real Madrid away.
Do you know what? If I was there, I probably would have went to that, and I went with you and agreed with that. But I'm gonna go with Real Madrid at home purely because it's one of those games that's why you love football. I know we didn't win the Champions League, and people can run whatever jokes they want to run, but to have a depleted side, to not necessarily be positive, to have all the the negatives from how the season went in the other competitions, and to see everybody's stand up tall from Kivio to Luis Skelly to Mikel Marino, it just can't put into words, man. Like, it's probably the best game at the Emirates we've seen in a long, long time. Probably since the Emirates has been open, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And the way we just smelt blood and went for it, kind of going back to what we said about goal of the season, Declan Rice's kind of stuff. That's probably the poster boy or poster game, better yet, of what we want to achieve. So I'd go with that. Disappointment of the season.
I think probably losing to Man United in the cup. I feel like we knew for a while, even before we sort of were officially out of the race, if you like, that the title was going to be tough. We dropped points. Liverpool were looking relentless. We had this injury crisis that had really gripped us at that point. But then you go into January, FA Cup, third round, and you're looking at it and you're going, okay, it's not an ideal draw. And we've had some really rubbish draws in the cups, to be fair to us. But I just looked at that and I thought, if we can go and win the FA Cup, not so much the Carabao, but the FA Cup, it would be a really big step for this team. And just to go down without a fight the way we did to a really poor Man United team, I found that really tough to swallow. Didn't help that there were loads of them in the stadium because they had that bigger allocation and all the rest of it, as is rules in the FA Cup. But yeah, that was a really hurtful day. So that's probably my worst one. Yeah, the disappointment of the season.
Do you know what? I probably feel like a spoiled kid was saying this one, because there's been games where we've obviously lost. There's been a number of frustrating draws. There's been the exit against Man United, as you said, which isn't the same game, but kind of in a sense of we created a million chances and didn't convert, kind of what we was talking about at the start of this, like Liverpool last year. It was almost like deja vu. I don't want to sound like a spoiled kid, but I'd probably say PSG away, not necessarily for the game. Well, obviously for the game over the two legs, but I just found myself kind of what you said about it being tough to swallow. It was just, it was a courageous effort. I do feel like we tried, but I just feel ultimately our trying was just nowhere near PSG's. And then when you get to the semi-finals, when you do what we did against Real Madrid, when you consider all the other competitions, it's just a case of what if. Like, I'm not saying Arsenal were necessarily going to win the Champions League, but it's a good look to beat Real Madrid like that. And when you're in the semis, you're so close, but yet so far. And it just made me think, what if we had the X factor and the firepower? So I'd say PSG away, man, just because that was my one hope. Pardon?
Liverpool not winning against Liverpool at home.
Yeah,
we were in a
the manner we
position to win
conceded as
that
well.
game. The way we conceded that equaliser, that was a sickener as well. Thinking back about it now.
Off topic, but what do you make of our points drop from winning positions? Because there's obviously been a lot of factors. Sometimes we've not killed games, we've had to claw games back and whatnot. What do you make of what we dropped 20 odd points from losing from winning positions? What do you make of that this year or the years gone by?
I don't really read into it too much, to be honest with you, because I think that it's a consequence of not having the firepower to finish games when we get in front. And I think that's a problem that we knew existed prior to the season that's just gone, but a problem that was exacerbated by the injuries that we had.
Yeah.
So because I could understand why we were in that position, I'm a lot more accepting of things when I know what
It was a bit more at peace.
Yeah, it doesn't stress me out as much because I know what the issue is. Whereas, there's been other things that I've struggled to understand, like Martin Odegaard's form. I can't figure out what's gone on there.
Join the club, man.
That stresses me out because I don't know what the solution and what the answer is to that. Whereas the thing about not putting games to bed, I'm not massively concerned. And a lot of those points that we dropped from winning positions, you'll find came towards the back end of the season when we were tired, when we were running on empty, when our focus had clearly shifted to the Champions League. I don't think they're results in a lot of cases that you should read too much into.
Hopefully, that's not a case next season. What's your
Yeah.
unsung hero of the year?
I'm going to say Jurien Timber. Because
Fair.
I think him playing at right back, he's just been immense all season, and
A
you
lot of
could say,
minutes.
yeah, a lot of minutes. Come back from an ACL and had to go straight into it. Never really got a breather. Never really got a break. Not for as long as he needed or would have liked. Massive pressure because Ben White wasn't fit. Didn't have Tommy Asu there to come in and support him either. Whenever we played Thomas Partey there, it didn't look quite right, and so
Yeah,
Mikel probably
let's
felt,
stop that, Arteta, man, please.
yeah, I think he felt that there was a real need to keep pushing Timber, and I think the fact that he came through the season the way he did after that ACL makes him my unsung hero.
I hear you, but I've spread way too much PR for Timber for me to say he's unsung hero. Do you know what? I would give it to Mikel Merino only because he came in. There was a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
like
hype.
that.
Yeah, no, because there was a lot of hype around him, and he was an Arsenal fan. And for me, obviously, I don't know him, but when I read the interviews and watch the interviews, he seems like a very humble man, very confident, but sometimes a bit like he needs a lot more confidence. Like I remember one of his first press conferences, like an off the cuff one after the game. He went to the journalist or whatever, please let me off. Like my English isn't that best. And I thought to myself, bro, you're speaking perfect English, like you really are. Just get a bit more confidence. And you know yourself, what in his first training session, the big lump of Gabriel Magalhaes fell on him. So yeah, to see him
Yeah.
come out and do what he did against Real Madrid playing up front, even the sound bites where he said like it was heartwarming. I think he said his father scored against Real Madrid as well. So I would say him, man. Really, he's really stepped up, and it's nice to just see players get a bit of plaudits because I'm all for praising and critiquing positively. But as you know yourself, in the space we're in, sometimes there's a bit of pylon, and I'm not saying he's thinking about this, but it's just not nice. So it is nice for him to just get a bit of sunny moments. So yeah, man, I'd go with Merino. You've gone with Timber, most improved player. I'm going with Kivio if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout for most improved. The way he came in under so much pressure and just took to it brilliantly was phenomenal. And he showed a level that I got to be honest, I didn't think he
Join
was
the
in him.
club, Harry, man. I didn't think he had that in his locker. And then, you know what? Fair enough. Maybe it's because you're now playing, you're getting confidence, you're actually in your actual role. That's a good question because for me, from a tactical point of view, you want to keep Kivio. I don't know for Magalhaes' rehab if he's going to be there for the start of the season, but you want to keep him for depth. I just wonder if this has made him think, do you know what? Maybe I can be a regular, or maybe Arteta will rotate me into the team a bit more. But equally, what if he's been given a taste of first team football and said, do you know what? I can cope against Real Madrid. I can play for another top European side. And then when I look at it from a finances point of view, not that I am a financial expert, Kivio seems I mean, it's all fun and games. People saying, sell Jesus, sell Havertz, sell Tomiyasu for a variety of reasons. These guys might not go anywhere. It feels like the interest from Italy and Kivio hasn't gone anywhere. So, like, do you think he could be one that departs while we're on the name of Kivio?
I think if the price is right, I think you should be open to it. I also think it's really dependent on the player as well, because he probably has got to a point where he feels like he deserves, especially after that run at the back end of last season, where he feels like he deserves to be a starter somewhere. And he will know full well that when Gabriel comes back and he and Saliba get going again, he's not going to break into that pairing. So I think I'd be open on this one. If the right price was there and the player really wanted it, then I'd let him go. But I'm also fine with keeping him as well. So it's kind of like just sit back, put your feet up, see what comes. If anything comes of interest, then maybe you consider.
Exactly. And I feel respectfully to the Arsenal team, I feel the likes of Zinchenko and players of that ilk, they're players that probably be entertained about moving on before I look at Kivio. Like
Yeah.
you said, if an offer comes in or he goes into Arteta's office and says, you know what, Gaffer, I want something new, then fair enough. If not, stay put. I'm not going to ask you
Yeah.
about young player of the season. It's clearly Miles Lewis-Skelly for
Yeah.
everybody. Player of the season, though.
Player of the season for me, it would have been Big Gabby up until when he got injured, and nobody else did enough to take that away from him in my eyes. So Big Gabby for me, I think he's really stepped up. I think Saliba had some difficult moments this season, probably gone under the radar a little bit, but
Yep.
Gabriel was a constant at left centre back. And not only does he patrol left centre back so brilliantly, he babysits whoever plays left back as well because of how much freedom they have positionally. It's not to say that they're not good players, but he needs to go out there earlier than most centre halves would. He needs to be switched on to threat coming down the opposition's right hand side. There's so much that he needs to be aware of all the time, and he does it all to perfection 99 times out of 100. So for me, Big Gabby.
And I'm happy you said that because that's my one as well, Gabriel Magalhaes. I feel there's many players that could lay claim to this, but I feel if you want to look at Arsenal's project, just look at Gabriel Magalhaes from start to
Yeah,
finish. Like I remember on my YouTube channel, a lot of fans, they can be wrong, I'm not a genius, but they used to say Pablo Mari's a better option. And obviously Magalhaes had the Bozo gene. He had to learn a lot. And to see what
yeah,
he's doing now, arguably, I wouldn't say he's underrated anymore, but I have felt since we've come into this kind of realm of challenging for trophies again, I don't really feel he's been given the plaudits he should have got in relation to someone like Saliba. What do you make of Saliba this year? Because I think he's been good. I'm not questioning his leadership qualities, but I feel maybe that kind of stuff is something he needs to add to his game. Like the couple of mistakes he's made when he's played with Kivior, respectfully to Kivior, if somebody was to tell you before these games, one of the centre halves would make a mistake or do something of that ilk, you probably would have pointed it towards Kivior. But it's been
yeah.
Saliba. Like, what have you made of him this year?
I think he's had a bit of a leveling out, which I think
Yeah.
probably was always on the cards. He's a young player, he's improving, he's learning his role. I think he's had this has been his third full season. And I
Mm.
think in the previous two, he was pretty much immaculate. So I'm not going to overreact about it, but I do feel like he needs to refocus a little bit. Hopefully, this summer does that for him, and he gets that opportunity. He's also played a lot of football for a young man as well. He's become part of the international scene as well, which is something new and something else that you got to cope with. And I'm not worried about it, is basically what I'm trying to say. I do think there were moments this season where I looked at him and thought he switched off, and he needs to improve that. And he did a press conference. I can't remember what game it was ahead of. It was ahead of one of the Champions League games. And obviously they put up a player and a manager, don't they, for a Champions League game. And he was brought into the room and someone asked him the question of, what do you think you need to improve on? Like, where do you think you could still do better? And he said it himself. Sometimes I switch off focus wise and I need to be able to manage that a little bit better. So the fact that he knows what the issue is, the fact that he can work towards that, I take confidence from.
I mean, like you said there, I think that's the double-edged sword with Saliba. I feel his greatest strength is his greatest weakness, on top of the obvious. Like, he's so calm and graceful in possession. Sometimes you probably almost believe that can get you out of jail. And to be honest, he has had that mistake in him. I remember Leicester, the first year he was properly integrated into Arsenal. He dropped a clanger at Leicester at home, and it was a nice touch from the fans to get him up again. And he kept going. Like you said, he's been immaculate. Life is coming quick for him. He's gone from, there was a point where fans didn't even know if he'd get a chance to being heralded as one of the best centre backs in the Prem and the world, and Real Madrid talks and whatnot. Ultimately, I think he's down by the high standards he set. And like you said there, it's like a leveler. It's like a reminder, especially in modern football, that he's only 23, or better yet, just turned 24. But yeah, man, I think Saliba's been good. Give the man a new deal. There used to be a time we would have prayed for one of Timber or Saliba or Magalhaes during this Emirates period, and we've got them and more. So I'm all happy. Bro, it's
Absolutely.
amazing. It's amazing, man. Like, big up Saliba, man. Just signed that new deal, man. Really.
That's it.
Hey, you're right. As we close up here, I got a couple of things to ask you. Yeah, obviously we've lightly touched on Gyökeres and Sesko, and obviously we were at this point where we're led to believe, we're deliberating in relation to what direction to go to. Which one would it be for you? And I remember you said at the beginning of the stream that you have concerns over both. What would they be as well?
So I lean slightly towards Gyökeres because I think that he's ready now to come in and impact the team, just because he's at a different stage in his career. He scores goals for fun, okay, albeit in a weaker league, but he does score goals. He's got that habit. And I really think he is, in a lot of ways, what we're missing. I love the way that he runs channels. I love the way that he pulls people out of position. I love that he's got those battling qualities as well. I think he's just a bit more ready. And I think if you're looking at medium to long term, there's no question about it. Sesko's the guy that you go for. But we're looking at tomorrow, not the day after, not next week, not the week after. We've got to focus on what's going to get us over the line tomorrow, because we've come so far in this project. We can't afford, in my opinion, to keep kicking the can down the road. So
Time
I do
to pick the
lean.
fruits now of our labor.
Exactly. So I do lean towards Gyökeres out of the two. Having said that, I don't have a problem if we go out and sign Sesko if we think that's the right one. But what I'm slightly concerned by is that there's no guarantee, in my opinion, that any of them are going to lift the level of the starting 11 straight away. Now, they lift the level of the squad, which in turn might help us get over the line. You don't know. But for example, if you bring in Benjamin Šeško, I can see a world in which he shares that role with Kai Havertz for the first 6 to 9 months. And that's fine with me because I quite like Kai Havertz. And I think he brings a lot to the team. But that's going to just create noise and frustration among certain sections of the fan base who are going to say, you spent 70 million quid on a striker and Kai Havertz is still starting up front for us. Because in my opinion, there's a lot of people that can't see what is staring them right in the face, which is that, okay, he's not the most clinical out and out number 9 on the planet, but he's a very, very effective player, Kai Havertz. And if seeing us without him versus with him over the last few months didn't convince you of that, then I don't know what you were watching.
We need him as part of the squad. There's no way around it. Whether
100%.
people like him or not, we're at where we're at. He's one of our more consistent players and reliable players, which is maybe damning on the club. People could argue. You can't really point that to Kai, if I'm honest. And there's no way around it. We have missed it. We've missed several players, and we've missed Kai, and he's not going anywhere. He's on big money. The manager likes him. The team likes him. I actually like Kai as well. Do I think he should be like our starter if I was saying Arsenal's strongest 11 if we want to win the champs? No, but if this season hasn't showed anyone anything, you need a squad, whether it's injuries, loss of form, dynamics. The players that start might not be doing it. The players that come off the bench might not. We need that. So it is what it is. And I'm with you with Gyökeres. I feel for me with Gyökeres, it's left field of what we try to do of the players of tomorrow and all of those kind of things. Yeah. What you see is what you get. I know he's 27, and in football terms, people look at you like you're 37, but he's ready right now. And I think it's unfair to Gyökeres. I'm sorry, to Sesko, but he's probably a signing many fans would have been okay with, or like you said, certain sections 2, 3, maybe even 4 years ago. When it's like we need to win now and tomorrow, I do feel those kind of pressures will be put on Sesko. Obviously, everybody has pressure, but he's still developing. Now, with Sesko, I just wonder, like you said, you're rotating in and out with Kai. How long is it going to take you to become that out-and-out number 9 if that is the case? And, you know, they clearly believe in Sesko. They've been looking at him for the best part of a year. These reports actually say he's more expensive than Gyökeres. So there's pros and cons to anything. But whether we go for Sesko, whether we go for Gyökeres, which both present risks, and we don't know. Gyökeres might sign be the best thing since sliced bread. He might sign be a flop. The same goes for Sesko. We've also seen the other side, Harry, in which when we don't do anything, it's going to get to a point. So it'd be interesting, man. Do you have any concerns about Gyökeres per se?
Yeah, I mean, the natural concern is everybody's talking about the 39 goals he scored in the Portuguese league in 33 games, but how does that translate in terms of the Premier League?
What's the exchange rate?
Yeah, what's the exchange rate? Exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Because, you know, often we see players in other leagues literally rip it up, bring him into the Premier League. What does that exchange rate, as you put it, which I thought was brilliant, how does that look? Does he score 15 in the Premier League? In which case, we're moaning again because Kai Havertz can do that. Does he score 20 in the Premier League, in which we're going to that slightly next level? Does he score 25, in which case you're thinking, bloody hell, we've done a really great bit of business here. I just don't know how it's going to translate. I find it really, really difficult, and I have done for years, and I've always said this, to go by sort of numbers alone and how that will translate into another league and another team in a completely different environment. So it's a tough one, man. It's a really tough one.
It's a very tough one, man. And it is what it is. But I'm also at the stage, Harry, as well, where we can talk about Gyökeres, we can talk about Sesko, we can compare both of them. But I'm at the point now, just get me another attacker, well, specifically a striker, and then like their pros and cons, just get them through the door, because we've been talking about this for a while now. So only time will tell. Do you have any confidence in us signing the Rodrigos of this world or the Anthony Gordons?
No, I just think they're deals that financially are beyond our reach. I think Rodrigo, especially. I think Xabi Alonso is going to come in. I'm sure. Look, every kid that grows up in South America or in the Latin world, they dream of playing for Real Madrid.
Yep.
And I aside from what Real Madrid want, I don't think Rodrigo will be willing to give that up without a fight. And I think with Xabi Alonso coming in, we got a problem, because he's probably had a positive conversation with him, probably feels like he's going to get the recognition that he deserves under Alonso, and probably will give it a season before deciding whether or not he wants to move on. I think that's bad news for us. I think the financials as well, they're hardly a club that need to sell, are they? So I think we're in a tough spot with Rodrigo. I just don't see it happening, to be honest.
I mean, it'd be a great player, it'd be a great dream. But like you said, whether it's the finances, whether it's Xabi Alonso, whether it's the Club World Cup, whether it's a World Cup to consider next year, sometimes, as you know yourself, leaving or staying at a club can affect your form and whatnot. It is what it is, man. Where are you at with Nico Williams and Anthony Gordon?
I like Anthony Gordon, but financially, again, I think because it's Newcastle, you're going to find it incredibly
difficult.
And they're going to play hardball, and you're going to pay well over the odds. We know that they have a particular issue with Arsenal behind the scenes. They feel like Arsenal have been one of the clubs at the front of stopping the likes of Saudi-owned Newcastle and some of the other really wealthy state-owned, I don't know if I can say that, clubs.
Of
You know,
course you can.
Arsenal are at the forefront of trying to stop those clubs essentially running away with it. So I think we're always going to have trouble negotiating with them. But I do like Anthony Gordon as a player. Nico Williams, I've just read a report now that Athletic Bilbao are trying to extend his contract, which will see his release clause go up even more. I was already skeptical about paying 58 million. The minute that goes higher, I'm not interested anymore.
And his wages.
Yeah, and his wages are crazy. They're looking to pay him 10 million a year. I saw him in the flesh at the Euros, and I was really impressed. And I came back from the Euros telling everyone, this guy's a player. But it just goes to show you should never sign players based on international tournaments, because this season has been really underwhelming and disappointing. So, again, look, we talk about the point of needle moving. Is Williams that much better than a Trossard or Martinelli? I don't think he is. I think Rodrigo is, but I think that's out of our reach. So I think when you get to this stage in your development, it's the hardest stage to be at, because the pool of players that can actually improve you just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so it becomes harder and harder to strengthen.
Like you said, and the costs that come with it. Now, I know there's PSR and wages and all of that to consider, but it's one where I'm happy I'm not Arteta or Andrea Bert or anyone in the scouting or recruitment staff, because do you find the stars of tomorrow or find unpolished diamonds like a Marmoush or better yet a Salah? Do you pay the going rate for someone like Rodrigo and the finances and the knock-on effects for your budget? I don't know. One person that, you know, to be fair, because when me and you have both said it now, Nico Williams, Rodrigo, Gordon, we've spoken about the finances. Now, this guy, Sane, will probably be on big wages, but it will be quote unquote a free transfer. What do you make on Sane? Because we're getting linked again.
I like Sane, but I like him as an addition. Like, if we go and sign a striker and a winger, and then we bring in Sane on a free as well to just bolster that, then I'm all good with it. But I don't like Sane as one of the primary options. And it's not about the player necessarily. I think he's very talented. I think he contributed a lot for Bayern last season, having not started that many games, coming off the bench. I think he got 11 goals, 6 assists, something like that in 30 appearances, 15 of which were from the bench. So I think he can clearly impact games. That can help us. It can. But he's got a patchy injury record, always has, which concerns me about him. What's the motivation level like at this stage in his career? Not
29.
sure. Exactly. And I think we're also scarred by the poor signings of Willian and Raheem Sterling, especially Sterling, a player that Arteta had a relationship with and thought could come in and aid us. That was an unmitigated disaster. So the idea of going down that route again and thinking that that's the way we're going to move forward, I think it's an idea that will frustrate a lot of people. So I'm not too keen on Sane unless it's in addition to the bulk of our business.
I think the biggest point you said there for me is the injury, the motivation. Like, I don't know him. I don't want to do the whole money grabber thing. But if you're on big money, you're injured, you've won stuff as well. And you could caveat that with, you know, when you like Real Madrid, for example, they win the Champions League 9 times out of 10, typically, not this year, but they're hungry and whatnot. I just look at Sane. You've been there, kind of done it where the Premier League's concerned. You're 29. We're at a different kind of stage. Even if, like you said, if he comes in as a buffer, how much of a motivation is that? Because you know you're just going to collect a pay packet. So it'd be interesting. But again, bro, I'm happy I'm not Arteta or Roberta. What do you feel for Nwaneri in the short to medium term? Because obviously Arteta spoke he could play up front. I would have liked to see him play an Odegaard's role off the left just to get game time. He could play in the 8. Probably seen as backup for Saka at the moment. Like, what do you think of him in the short medium term? Because we want him to sign a new deal. There's little rumblings he's unhappy, etc. allegedly.
In the long term, I think he ends up playing in a more central position, but obviously he has that capability of playing from the right. And that's why we talk about versatility within the group, don't we? A lot. And that's another example of it. I think, look, I don't think that he's unhappy. I don't think there's a problem. From what I've heard, he's been nursing a bit of an injury, which is why his minutes were limited at the end of the season. They didn't feel it was worth taking the risk. He's still growing. He's still developing. He's made that jump up from, you know, being a part of the squad, being in the Premier League 2, to now playing the men's game, which is completely different, not just physically, but mentally, the pressure that you're under, the scrutiny, everything is different, isn't it? So I'm not too worried about him. I think he's still on the right path. I think he's still going to turn out to be a great player. But I think the idea is for him to play slightly further infield. as he develops and as he bulks up a little bit physically. So I'm not stressed about this one. I think he'll be fine. I think he knows that as well, and I think it's all pretty relaxed around him.
I think it's that age-old thing, or better yet, I say age-old thing, kind of this new kind of thing in football, in that if you're good at 16, 17, 18, you're meant to just play all the time. Everything's
Yeah.
amazing. The minute you're not playing, get rid of him. I'm sure, naturally, I want players to be disappointed not to play and whatnot. And as you said, he's nursing an injury, but I'm
Mm.
sure if you asked him this time last year what his ambitions would be, everything he's achieved personally at this point at Arsenal, he probably would have sat there and said, I couldn't dream of this. Like you said, you've gone from being on the peripheral, that weird kind of grey area where you're part of the first team, but you're not part of the first team.
Yeah.
When he played West Ham away and Brentford away, you made your debut, but you weren't really part of it. Now you're part of it. Now just go and give the manager a headache. So I've got nothing to fear about. We've spoken about Zubimendi. Last thing as well, Thomas Partey has been in talks with Barcelona. Do you see him staying? Do you think it's right to give him a new deal with his age and maybe the wages and all that?
I think it's, if the terms are right, then I'm all for it. I don't want to tie yourself down to a 2-3 year deal. If it's a 1 year plus one with an option, for example, I'm fine with that. And I think it will help Zubimendi bed in. I think not having that pressure of coming in and being the guy and having Partey to share the role with, a bit like when we're talking about Sesko, we're saying actually it probably benefits him that if he does come in, he's got Kai Havertz there to share that burden and responsibility with. I think the same is applicable to Zubimendi and the relationship he could potentially have with Thomas Partey. So
that's a good point.
I think he's obviously open to the idea of staying. It worries me a bit that Barcelona have come in, but are his representatives using Barca as a vehicle to try
another point
and help their negotiation? Maybe. Look, what it's going to cost you to go out and get another midfield player, which I think we definitely have to do, by the way, if Thomas Partey goes, is going to be way more than what you're going to give him in a 2-year contract. So I think to find a player of that quality isn't easy. I've always got that thing in the back of my mind. He's had one good season fitness-wise. Is he due a bad one now? That is obviously a thing, but I think we should try. If we can do a deal that works for everyone, then keep hold of him because he's an asset.
I think you're bang on the money. I think, like you said there, crucially, no disrespect to Thomas Partey, but how many times do you see a player playing out their skin? Last year, the deal, in Partey's case, ever present. You then sign a new deal and you kind of revert back to type. You made a great point in that, how much is it going to cost you on top of everything else you're trying to do this summer in replacing Partey? And I share that sentiment. You definitely have to look to sign a centre mid. I know a lot of fans, if you went through the squad, there's many players that they would want to get rid of and bring in. We're not going to do all of that. So for me, keeping Partey kind of not parks off something, but it allows you to, okay, when you've done everything for this summer, now you begin the scouting for that centre mid either in the January period of 2026 or the summer of the following year. I want to keep Thomas. Arteta clearly loves him. I don't think there's any other player with injury records like this that have played on a major basis that he likes. And if the man's comfortable, let's give Berto all the hope he can. As you said, I don't know if the agents are playing games, but Barcelona and the attraction of playing for them and Hansi Flick, it is something to worry about. And we are getting to the stage now where are you going to sign or are you not? But like you said at the start of this, bro, it's like if you want to break away from football, you need to take it now, or if not, everything's dominated by these transfers, man. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. But I've taken up far too much of your time, Harry. It's been a fantastic chat. Let people know they can find you if I let you get out of here, my friend.
Thanks for having me, man. You can find me on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, man. We do a daily show. Go over and check it out, and on the usual places like X and Instagram and all of that as well. Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it. Enjoyed the chat.
Minor, man. I've always got time for you, man. Me and you. I remember being on the front line where me and you were saying, you know what, Emre's not the guy, and we got absolutely pelted, but we won that.
Yeah.
Remember, we got killed for that, man. You was there with me. We was in the trenches, man. But as Harry said, Chronicles of a Gooner. It's in the title. People, give the guy a butchers of his content. Great content. Does great stuff with the media side of things as well. Very balanced opinions. Harry, big up yourself. Let me let you enjoy your day, my guy. Peace.
Thank you, man. All the best.
Come on, in a bit.